Earlier in the morning, we spoke to Muthoni Wanyeki, Regional Director, Amnesty International, on the report that was released by Amnesty International touching on Darfur. Let's listen into that interview.
For starters, kindly take us through what Amnesty International found out from these investigations to do with the use of chemical weapons by the Sudanese government.
Well, our crisis team researched remotely, given that there is no access to Darfur. We conducted 231 interviews, including 184 with survivors of attacks. These attacks began in January 2016, ground and air attacks. The ground attacks continued until the rainy season, until May this year. The air attacks are ongoing, with the most recent one being on September 9th. What they included were bombings, displacement of people. By July this year, OCHA, the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, had estimated that 251,000 were displaced. What we found from our interviews, especially with survivors, with medical professionals, and using satellite imagery to confirm and corroborate some of the testimony from survivors. We confirmed that 171 villages in Jebel Mara in Darfur had been destroyed, some of them through multiple attacks, including torching after bombings. Many of the survivors spoke of what they called poisonous smoke, and we documented, including through photographic evidence, really severe symptoms experienced as a result of this smoke. Between 200 and 250 people were confirmed to have died as a result of exposure to the smoke. Hundreds more developed symptoms, including very severe stomach problems, bloody vomiting, blistering and rashes on skin that hardened and then fell off, changing color of the skin, changing color of the eyes, some resulting in complete loss of vision, and severe respiratory problems. These we documented, like I said, from survivors, from medical professionals, and we then showed the clinical findings and symptoms to two experts in the use of banned chemical and biological agents. They basically confirm that these symptoms are consistent with what they called vesicants or blister agents, which are banned under international law. Obviously, a complete investigation would be needed to confirm it was this use of class of agents, and that's what we're calling for in the report.
Can we ascertain that, or can we confidently say that these were intentional attacks by the Sudanese government on its own people?
Well, yes. I mean, the Sudan Armed Forces, together with the Rapid Support Forces and local militia known as the Janjaweed, were basically trying to clear the air and end the capacity of operations of the Sudan Liberation Army, the Abdel Wahid group, which is the only group not in the peace talks right now. But in doing so, they didn't target this group. What we documented were indiscriminate attacks against civilians and civilian property. Like I said, we confirmed the complete destruction of 171 villages, not just from the testimony, but from before and after satellite imagery. We confirmed 367 people dead, including 95 children. Obviously, that's what we could confirm, but given the size of Jebel Mara and the areas that this took place in, deaths would probably be more. We documented rape. All in all, what we found were really and indiscriminate attacks on civilians. Many of these villages were attacked when there was no presence of the SLA in those villages. And obviously, that violates the principle of distinction in international humanitarian law and amounts to a war crime.
Conflict has raged on for years now, almost 13, if I'm counting it right. And once in a while, we've seen the international community step in. But at this point, this looks like the government is hitting a new low. Are we giving Sudan the much attention it needs?
Well, as you know, there is a joint mission of the UN and the African Union in Darfur broadly, but they certainly aren't present in Jebel Mara. And I agree with you that Darfur has really dropped off the map. I think we have put so many hopes in sort of the dialogue between the government and some of the armed groups. And put many hopes in the high-level panel for Sudan, the dialogue with the opposition, that we haven't really been paying attention to what's happening to ordinary people in very remote areas of Darfur. This conflict is ongoing. There are other conflicts ongoing in Sudan, in Blue Nile, in South Kordofan, but this report concerns really what is happening to ordinary Sudanese people in Darfur.
Does this really mean that the dialogue being spearheaded by all those international communities is not really working, specifically to do with the areas and the villages you worked on as Amnesty International?
Well, access is a problem. The UNIMED forces within Darfur don't have access to this particular part of Darfur. I mean, as you know, Sudan is huge. And that's one thing that we're calling on for the AU, for the UN to put pressure on the government of Sudan to immediately allow them access and to establish a permanent presence in this part of Darfur. You're right when you say both testimony from survivors as well as from diplomats responding to this report have been, this is a new low. We haven't seen the use of chemical weapons in this conflict before.
Muthoni, Bashir is being sought after by the International Criminal Court, and not once have they requested a number of African countries that he's visited to hand him over. Are Africans or are African countries being complacent when it comes to handing over Bashir to the ICC?
Well, my own feeling about this is that Africa is really letting concerns about global power, and of course there are many concerns about global power and its use in Africa, override concerns for the lives of ordinary Africans. What is happening to these Darfuris is completely unacceptable. The world really needs to wake up to this fact and really begin to put pressure on the government of Sudan again to immediately halt all attacks that violate international humanitarian law and international human rights law.